If you took an NBA fan from the late 1960s and transported them to 2023, they would probably hardly recognize the game anymore. From the style of play to the style of the players. And not to mention that big bow-shaped line around each basket that gives a team 3 points for every hoop. As the game has evolved into the modern NBA we all love, many things have changed over the years. But there is at least one thing that would be familiar to our time-traveling 1960s NBA fan. An 82-game regular season. Officially adopted by the league in 1967, the current length of the season has remained constant, but for an occasional labor dispute. Oh, and of course that whole global pandemic thing. With 82 games year in and year out, even the most exciting moments can, at times, be fleeting. While we remember the great games of the playoffs and finals, the individual games within any regular season grind rarely live on in our memories. In today's episode, the first of a new ongoing series, we take our NBA time machine and visit some of the greatest games that most don't even remember. It's time for Random Game Rewind, and it's time for Once Upon a Dribble. Welcome in, one and all, welcome in. This is Once Upon a Dribble. This is Calvin Johnson hanging out with you for another one of our new micro-episode series, Random Game Rewind. We're really excited for this one, and really excited for some of the NBA memories that we can either bring back that are long forgotten, or perhaps new memory that's a game you never even knew about. To kick things off and set sail on this new series, we are taking a look at a game between two teams that would soon become very well acquainted adversaries. We're taking the NBA time machine back to a frigid January 1992 night in Salt Lake City, where a 28-year-old Michael Jordan, less than a year removed from his first NBA championship, at the time averaging 29.6 points per game to go along with 6 rebounds and 6 assists, had the defending champions sitting at a league-leading 39-7 record. That's a 71-win pace. It would be the second time that season and last time that season that the Utah Jazz and the Chicago Bulls would tangle, and it would be the one and only annual tilt in Utah. Well, everywhere he went, MJ's unprecedented popularity and star power preceded him, as he was often cheered like a hometown hero in every NBA arena. In this, his first career visit to the newly built and opened Delta Center, it was no exception, as an appreciative ovation echoed through the building when Chicago's starting shooting guard was announced. That was different, Utah Jazz rookie David Benoit would comment in post-game interviews. I noticed a lot of fans cheering for them. It confuses you a little bit. Well, in just a few short years, the Utah faithful's opinion of MJ would evolve into outright animosity, as the Jazz would soon become the final note of Michael's last dance. But at least for one icy evening in 1992, Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls were received with welcoming applause from the Utah fans. Well, however the Jazz fans felt about that evening, the sentiment was not exactly shared by the Jazz roster, as just over 3 weeks prior, the Jazz had been on the receiving end of a common MJ masterclass, with Michael recording 37 points on 60% shooting to lead the Bulls to a convincing 105-90 win in the ill-fated Chicago Stadium. The United Center was still under construction at this time. The Jazz came into the game with a record of 30-17 and clinging to a 3-game lead in the Northwest Division. Boasting 2 future Hall of Famers of their own, Utah was led by point guard John Stockton, who came into the game averaging 16 points and a ridiculous 14 assists per game. He was alongside the mailman himself, Karl Malone, who entered the game with averages of 28 points and 11 rebounds per game. What would transpire over the late evening hours of January 2nd, 1992 would prove to be the then longest game in Jazz franchise history. A 3-hour and 11-minute back-and-forth slugfest that came down to the final 0.5 seconds of triple overtime and came down to the most unlikely hero of all to deliver the final blow. Let's take a quick look back at how it all played out. In a game that largely embodies 90s style basketball, both teams played at a pace of 91.3. That would be an unconscionably slow by modern NBA standards. And to 90s style, they ended the first half with a lot of hard fouls, a lot of low post entry passes, and some wild off-balance mid-range jumpers. It led to a 51-48 score in favor of Utah at halftime. So maybe it was the fact that Chicago was on the second of a back-to-back. Maybe blame it on the high elevation of Salt Lake City. Or perhaps actually credit the defense of one Jeff Malone. But indeed, the second half lacked the offensive efficiency that had defined the NBA champion Bulls and their transcendent stern. MJ would finish this game shooting just 13 of 35. That's a 38.2 field goal percentage on the game. The Jazz, however, failed to take advantage and would themselves be held to just 37 second half points, with no player feeling more fatigued on offense than the one who had to guard MJ on defense. As Utah's second leading scorer, the two-time All-Star out of Mississippi State, Jeff Malone, no relation to his MVP teammate, no relation to Moses, he would have the shooting night from hell, finishing with a feeble 4 of 21 from the field. "I haven't shot like that all season," Malone would say. "I just didn't feel it. Everything was going in and out." Despite Jeff's struggles and an overall pedestrian scoring performance across the board in the second half, the Jazz found themselves in an 89-89 tie in the final minute, and a chance to play for the final shot. Only to have that chance derailed on an apparent case of miscommunication, as a pass from the NBA's all-time assist leader went out of bounds, giving Chicago a chance to win, inbounding from inside of mid-court with 3.7 seconds on the clock. In the type of crunch time scenario that very much resembled a moment, still 6 years out, that would be etched into NBA history as MJ's last shot, Michael would take the inbounds, shake and bake his way to an open jumper attempt to seal the win. This time, however, the ball would meet the iron and bounce harmlessly out of bounds as time expired, and an overtime commenced. The sellout crowd of 19,911 fans likely felt that victory was in hand, as with 11 seconds remaining in OT, the sharp-shooting Blue Edwards approached the foul line with a 2-point lead and a 7-for-7 free-throw night thus far. The first attempt was true. The Jazz's lead was 3. The second attempt, and a chance to essentially make it a 2-possession game, clunked in and out, and right into Scottie Pippen's 7'3" wingspan. A quick timeout found Chicago with the ability to play for the last shot of overtime, down 3. With the memory of his missed shot in regulation still fresh in his mind, Michael Jordan took the inbounds pass, and with everybody in the arena, everybody watching at home, and everybody's pet cat knowing exactly what was coming, with a quick step back that would make James Harden give a double take, Jordan pulled up for his only 3-point attempt of this game. The ball didn't even touch rim as it glided through the nylon. Legendary Utah Jazz play-by-play announcer Hot Rod Hundley summed up the feelings of all Jazz fans as he proclaimed, "Unbelievable, they let him have a 3? The only flaw in this vintage MJ dagger was that it did leave 6 seconds on the clock. But no matter, as it would be found to be enough to order up 5 more minutes of basketball. As a brilliant pass from Stockton to Jeff Malone, just outside the paint, to the left of the basket, ended up the way most of Jeff's shots had that evening, in and out. The second overtime period seemed to quickly tilt in Chicago's favor, as they built an early 6-point lead. But it would be Blue Edwards paying his penance for the missed free throw that may have ended the game, nailing 2 3-pointers in the period to keep the Jazz in contention. Nevertheless, as the cookie crumbled, it appeared that the defending champions would be victorious, having earned a 115-112 lead with 30 seconds left on the foul line for 2. Hundley would lament to his Jazz fan listeners that, well, this should just about do it here, as MJ, perfect from the line to that point, prepared to put the game out of reach. And that's when the unthinkable happened. Michael missed. And then Michael missed again. 2 missed free throws. I guess sometimes even goats can trip on their way to the top of the mountain. The mailman elevated to claim one of his 21 rebounds on the night off the second missed free throw, pushed it ahead to his Hall of Fame running mate, who paused his pass-first instincts for just a moment, long enough to launch a stop-and-pop 3-pointer from the left elbow. That shot from the 40% three-point shooter was never in doubt. And just like that, the game was tied at 1:15. So think of a time where you had to stay late at work. Chances are, when you finally got down to the last hour, the last few minutes of that extended working day, you probably weren't the happiest of campers. Such would be the case for the defending champs, as emotions took control of the third overtime. With a minute and 15 seconds on the clock, and with Chicago holding a 1-point lead, while corralling a rebound off yet another Jeff Malone miss, Scottie Pippen was whistled for the loose ball foul, his 6th of the game, and immediately proceeded to slam the ball to the ground. That, my friends, is what I like to call a Draymond Green special, but most people call it a technical foul. After the Stockton free throw, and exactly 1 minute of game clock later, Jazz rookie Ben Raw sank 2 free throws for a 123-121 lead. Well, if even the best fall down sometimes, the best of the best pick themselves right back up. Despite missing the game in regulation and clunking 2 nail-in-the-coffin free throws, the best to ever play the game sank the game-tying jumper from the free throw line extended, leaving the Bulls just 5 seconds away from forcing an absolutely insane 4th overtime. With no timeouts for the Jazz, it was coast-to-coast time for, you guessed it, Jeff Malone. Wait, what? On one of the worst shooting nights of his life, the other Malone took the inbound and sprinted 90 feet, raised a 5-foot floater tightly guarded by MJ, and a whistle blew. With 0.5 seconds on the clock, in a tied game in triple overtime, Michael Jordan had just sent Jeff Malone to the free throw line. And boy, did all hell break loose after that one. An enraged Phil Jackson shouted from the sideline his discontent regarding the call. A call that was, admittedly, iffy. But an even more disgruntled Michael Jordan expressed his displeasure dangerously close to referee Tommy Wood. Too close. Contact occurred, and MJ was called for the tech and ejected from the game. After logging exactly 56 minutes played, and despite an off-night shooting, putting up 35 points, 13 rebounds, and 8 assists, it was the one and only ejection of Michael's entire NBA career. Well, first part, Jeff Malone would overcome his shooting nightmare when it did matter most. After the game, he would recall, "Once Michael got the technical, I said, 'Hey, I've got 3 shots. I wasn't going to blow all of those.'" Well, he wouldn't blow any of them, making all 3 of his free throws. And then, finally, somewhat miraculously, the game was over, and the Utah Jazz had won 126 to 123. The dejected and frankly heated Chicago Bulls declined to attend post-game interviews, except for a brief statement from Coach Ejection complaining about the foul that ended the game. "Ridiculous call," Jackson stated. "On a desperate run like that, you just don't call that." Whether right or wrong, the call was made, and on the shooting of a struggling shooter, the day was won for the Jazz. "We kept coming back and coming back," said Jazz center Mark Eaton, "and finally, we outlasted them." Thanks for tuning in to another installment of Once Upon a Dribble and the first installment of Random Game Rewind. If you liked what you've heard here, please subscribe to the pod on whichever platform you have listened to. Help us grow the show. Visit us on Twitter at OnceDribble to suggest which random game we should highlight next. Keep it tuned in for all our episodes, and wherever you are, thank you, and have a good night.